When I see patients in the office with shoulder problems, probably 7 or 8 out of 10 patients have a problem related to the rotator cuff. The cuff isn't always torn, but most of the time it's at least a little inflamed. The rotator cuff is a group of 4 tendons. Some people call it the rotator cuff, but it's not cup, it's cuff, C-U-F-F. It's a cuff of 4 tendons, and those 4 tendons surround the ball. The shoulder's a ball and socket joint. Those 4 tendons surround the ball, and those tendons function to keep the ball situated in the socket, because even though it's a ball and socket joint, it's a real shallow ball and socket joint, kind of like a golf ball on a tee. So in order to keep it from rocking in and out, it requires that rotator cuff, that group of those 4 tendons, to attach to the ball and keep it centered in the socket. Unfortunately, one of the rotator cuff tendons can become inflamed when people do overhead type activities. Baseball pitchers and people that do overhead sports, swimmers, tennis player, baseball pitchers, can have rotator cuff problems earlier in life. Most people get rotator cuff problems later in life, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And generally, it's an injury through attrition. You do carpenters that work overhead, hairdressers that work with their arms in this position. Anytime the arm is brought up to this plane and above, the rotator cuff can rub under a little bone called the acromion. If that happens enough, you can tend to get a tear. Before you get the tear, generally though, you have an achy shoulder, and people will be diagnosed with things such as bursitis, tendonitis, impingement syndrome. Those are all tend to be related. So when I see someone in the office and they say, I have pain in the front of my shoulder, sometimes it goes down my arm, sometimes it goes up in my neck, and it bothers me mainly when I reach up or I reach back, you almost don't have to go any further. Now you have to make sure they don't have arthritis, so you get a set of x-rays, because if you have arthritis, that kind of all bets are off. You have to treat the arthritis. But most of the time it's a simple bursitis and tendonitis related to the rotator cuff. And if you can catch it early, you can treat it with therapy and anti-inflammatories, changing a person's work habits, those kind of things that can decrease the inflammation, the pain, and make the problem go away. If a rotator cuff is torn acutely, or if it's an acute tear on a chronic thinned rotator cuff tendon, then sometimes surgery is indicated. Even people with rotator cuff tears don't necessarily need to have surgery. As long as they can sleep at night, as long as they can do the activities every day that they like to do, you don't have to treat rotator cuff tears. But if someone just can't sleep at night, and that's one of the hallmarks of rotator cuff tears, if someone can't sleep at night or can't play tennis or golf or one of the other activities they like to do, then they'll come to rotator cuff surgery, which is simply reattaching that torn tendon back to the bone. It requires a pretty involved recovery, but it's a pretty straightforward operation. I think if you asked 50 orthopedic surgeons, you'd probably get 50 different answers. In general, you have to immobilize the shoulder while that tendon heals back to the bone. And from several studies, it takes about 6 weeks for that tendon to get healed back to the bone. If it's a small tear, it's a very securely fixed tear, then you can get the shoulder moving passively a little bit sooner. If it's a big tear or one that the fixation is not as good as you would hoped, then you have to hold them down a little bit longer. But generally, I will let people do some gentle motion right away, but I won't let them do active motion where they say, I'm going to lift my arm up and lift it up. I'm not going to let them do that for about 6 weeks. And that's usually when I start physical therapy too. Obviously, the first goal is to get the tendon to heal. If you can get the tendon to heal and at the same time get the shoulder gently moving, then you've won both wars. So if the tendon is well fixed and it's a small tear, I will have the patient do some gentle pendulum exercises, maybe walking up the wall a little bit, and hopefully then when the tendon's healed down, the therapy becomes a little more rigorous and much easier for the patient if they've already got some range of motion. And then strength gradually comes later. So once the tendon's healed down, you can start doing the strengthening exercises and get back to a normal shoulder. Oftentimes when you see someone in the office with shoulder pain and an MRI tells you that the rotator cuff is not torn, they may have a spur under a portion of their shoulder blades that's pinching the tendon, and if that continues to pinch the tendon, it may eventually cause a tear in the tendon. So if modalities such as therapy and rest and anti-inflammatories and change of occupation and change of positioning when you work has failed, then you can simply arthroscopically, just like we did do with the knee kind of came about first and then the shoulder, you can arthroscopically go in and remove that little spur, smooth the tendon, and then people will have a normal shoulder again. The beauty of St. Luke's Hospital is that it covers a wide range of orthopedic problems. We have specialists in hand, foot, ankle, knee, shoulder, hip. Practically any orthopedic problem can get done right here. Most of the time we can do some of these things as outpatients, and sometimes we have to bring people in the hospital. But from the moment patient hits St. Luke's Hospital doors, they're greeted warmly, they're taken care of as if you would take care of one of your own family members. Surgery's performed, they get recovered and back to either home or to the hospital room. So I don't think you can find a better choice in a hospital than St. Luke's Hospital.